Hundreds of Dunedin residents joined thousands across New Zealand recently to protest extensions to the powers of the government's spy agency. Speakers concerned about the Government Communications Security Bureau and related legislation bill included the city's Mayor, Dave Cull. The issue has a strong international element, and Professor of International Relations Robert Patman is here with his analysis. Good evening.
Good evening, Rebecca.
Now, news on New Zealand's involvement came recently courtesy of Edward Snowden. Tell us about that.
Well, a report produced in the last 24 hours quotes from Snowden that it's become apparent that one of the collection points for the National Security Intelligence Agency in the United States is a facility belonging to the Government Communications Security Bureau near Blenheim, the Waihopu facility. And it appears that some of the fears that people have is that not only is the legislation to amend the Government Communications Security Bureau likely to extend surveillance over New Zealanders in New Zealand, but that information could be available to the United States. And that allegation, that accusation, has been given some substance by Mr. .com, who's chimed in also in the last week, that when the GCSB were investigating him, all the information they gathered was simultaneously available in Washington, which suggests that there is a very close nexus there between the facility near Blenheim and America's ability to tap into that information.
What is the latest that we know about Snowden's movements?
Well, he's been granted temporary asylum in Moscow until July next year, and we understand that his father has just been given a visa to visit him. His father has said that that his son can't be given a fair trial in the United States, but that's where he is at the moment, in Moscow, after a lengthy period in the airport at Moscow.
So what are the issues raised by New Zealanders?
Well, I think many people are worried about the extension of the Government Communications Security Bureau, because it had acted illegally when it actually monitored Mr. .com, and now that organisation has been given much more extensive powers, not just to intercept foreign signals and intelligence, but also to perhaps act on behalf of domestic agencies, and which has raised the issue of whether New Zealand is becoming something of a surveillance state. And I suppose the government argues, of course, that it's doing this to protect the freedom and the security of New Zealanders, because there are real threats out there that some New Zealanders may be linked, for example, with Al-Qaeda. The counter-argument is that even by his own admission, Mr. Key is conceding that the threat is very small. And are these measures disproportionate to the actual threat? In other words, are we curtailing people's privacy and their potential freedoms for what is a rather small threat? And of course that raises another issue. If you're engaged in a political struggle with terrorism, like New Zealand is and a number of other democratic countries, do you best combat it by curtailing the freedoms of your own citizens? Are you playing into the hands of the people you want to actually diminish and discredit?
Now, I understand that there are also some concerns about the oversight of the Bureau.
Yes, now this has come into sharp focus with the proposed extension of the Government Communications Security Bureau, because basically at the moment the Prime Minister, who has the portfolio of intelligence, appoints both the director of the organisation, the GCSB, but also the Inspector General who oversees the organisation. So he appoints the director of the organisation, GCSB, but he also appoints the oversight institution, and that makes many people believe the watchdog, the Inspector General, should actually be appointed by Parliament, and it should be out of the Prime Minister's hands. There seems to be something of a potential conflict of interest.
What stage is the legislation at?
Well, it's quite advanced now. The government has got through the second reading, thanks in part to Mr. Dunn's about-face on the issue. He said that he was able to support the government because he was convinced there was now more oversight. But a lot of course, critics like the Greens and Labour remain very vocally opposed. And I think many New Zealanders across the political spectrum worry that whether this is a disproportionate response to what is a problem for many democratic countries. How do you deal with terrorist organisations?
Professor of International Relations Robert Patman, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.